Okay, let's press on. Thank you for joining the call today, where we are going to look at a couple of important elements. We're going to look at the Seers15 program with Nintex that we will address toward the end of the session. We are going to, along the way, look at the Nintex Workflow platform in a bit more detail, and how, as an organization, Seers has replatformed an application in 2 days with the Nintex software platform. On the call today, as apart from the team from Seers, is Chris Ellis from Nintex, and Chris will undertake a presentation and demonstration of the Nintex software. Before we head into that presentation, I'd like to just hand over to Steve McLean, who is the CEO of Seers, to explain a little bit about Seers as an organization and give some bit of context to the presentation Chris will undertake. So Steve, I've handed over control to you.
Sorry. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Look, thank you so much for joining today. I'm the CEO for Seers. Just wanted to today tell you a little bit about what we do in the space of using Nintex as a product around a lot of work with app transformation and better data and insights. So look, the company's been established now for the last 8 years. We do a lot of work in federal government, state government, and commercial customers. We've worked a lot with the Microsoft products, worked predominantly with products like SharePoint a lot, with collaboration and helping customers with their productivity needs. Typically what we've found with SharePoint is that it's sort of the product which everybody has. It sort of integrates quite well with Microsoft Office, but when you start to really kind of push it, you sort of hit beyond the bounds of what the product can do sort of out of the box without requiring a lot of heavy sort of customization. And often what that means is that a lot of customization you end up with a huge technical code debt. So today what we wanted to showcase was, with sort of a legacy app replatforming of Lotus Notes. Lotus Notes is used by this customer in the finance area and the government, and they've built quite a substantial number of investment of apps in IBM, which they're looking to move across into the Microsoft platform. So what was critical was trying to get the user experience right, because a lot of the customers that come from Lotus Notes, they've had very functioning forms and processes end to end. So we had to go through with creating this into a replacement, which we use Nintex for this, because it enabled a lot of just great user experience out of the box. It enables the developers to add a lot of great functionality behind the scenes, to put in a lot of complex business logic and forms logic, getting data from different sources to create a really nice end-to-end application. So as a company, we do a lot with mobility for the enterprise and apps. So we've done a lot with field services work, mobile apps which integrate with SAP or Salesforce to do a lot of it transactional type end-to-end processes for users out in the field. So with mobile experience, you get access to the wayfinders and access to the camera and other pieces. So it's trying to improve the usability for being able to perform jobs and tasks whilst being able to link back into a lot of the legacy kind of the back end. So we've managed to really go through with creating a really nice user experience and improving the productivity of the workforce. The other thing we've done a lot with is forms and workflow automation, which is what we'll cover off with the Nintex product today. Data insights. So we do a lot with Power BI, with connecting into data in Azure, data in SharePoint or CRM, and being able to look at getting a lot more insights into information and being able to build nice dashboards and information around that with Power BI. The digital workplace. So we've got an intranet in a box now solution, which we'll just quickly show you in a second as well. And it's what we do a lot with customers who have an existing instance of Office 365, which they want to consume more and to be able to have an intranet function without requiring a lot of heavy development and customization time. So in effect, we can have an intranet up and running in a matter of weeks, which we can do through pilots and very agile workshops to go through with launching an intranet as a pilot and then going through your organization's information architecture to define the features, functions, and content and the training so that users can have a very sort of enterprise-ready intranet in weeks. And today we'll look at as well as around legacy app replacement, as I sort of just mentioned before, around replacement with the Lotus Notes, what we did with the Nintex. So as a company, what we provide end-to-end to customers is we focus on the user experience. It's a very critical part of transformation. A lot of it's around the usability of intranets, of apps and mobility. So we have UX who can be involved in the process to work with research, design, do mock-ups in a very continuous, agile sort of way of doing things to work through with, get the right outcome, because that's what's going to drive their success for these type of projects. We've got a team of also do the design from the architecture right through to development, and we can also provide you with ongoing support, training and maintenance with technical and these applications that we provide. So recently we've been doing an intranet replacement with Baptist Care. So they had an intranet which was pre-built in SharePoint 2007, 2010, which they've recently been adopting a cloud-first strategy with replacing all of their legacy applications and moving them into the cloud. So what we provided was an intranet in a box solution. So that helped them to really rapidly understand and transform to a modern interface in Office 365. There's been quite a gap between their existing instance of SharePoint to Office 365. So by being able to pilot this enabled us to really, at the early stages, help them to do a gap analysis, kind of get ideation around what's in a modern intranet, how that can benefit the organization. So that's been a sort of a rapid way how to take them through to get an outcome so that the business objectives align with what the technology can do these days with Office 365. So that's just sort of a sample mock-up of what that can sort of look like. As I was saying, this is something that can be done in a matter of sort of weeks of time. Similarly with Amcor's another client as well, which we help them work towards with revamping their sort of legacy SharePoint site. They had, as the business it's a global sort of organization consisting of 37,000 employees. A lot of the growth has been organic. So there's a lot of mismatch between some different regions across the US and Europe. They've still been running IBM Lotus Notes, whilst in the Australia, New Zealand region and Asia, APAC, they've been using SharePoint 2010. So it's the journey for them was trying to align everyone to move towards a centralized intranet solution, Office 365, while some of the content, the way it's maintained, needs to be a bit decentralized, where content editors can work in different locations and really have kind of a single group of approvers at a centralized point who can really approve the final content that goes up on the intranet. So out of the 37,000 employees being manufacturing, so there's still about 17,000 employees, some kiosk workers in sort of offices throughout the world, which have now been accessing this intranet, which we've revamped for them. So that's just a sample of what that sort of looks like. And sort of liking into legacy app replacement. So we've done this quite extensively with the Nintex product. We've found that, typically with Lotus Notes applications, what has existed for quite some time, is trying to work out a portfolio around a process of a matrix, like what falls into which camp, what's easy, what's medium, what's most critical. So with our experience, we can assist companies, organizations with the journey of how they should move into a replacement into a Microsoft equivalency. So what we did with ASIC was to help them identify which applications are a kind of a most important, what's going to have kind of quick wins, also what's in terms of its size, and there's not too many unknown complexities that we can quickly move across. And effectively, that's what we've done with Nintex Forms workflows. So we could quickly look at these existing apps, quickly, in a matter of days, move these across into an Nintex replacement, getting the same functionality, the same user experiences, and even better than what they were using before with Notes. Recently with construction industry, which is doing work, it's a joint venture, so they're doing work on the next metro crossing. So it's a joint venture with Leighton's, UGL, CIMIC, John Holland, and Hochtief. It's their challenge was they've got thousands of construction workers, and they've got a SharePoint portal. So they started with a lot of InfoPath forms and found that putting InfoPath and SharePoint out of the box workflow together, quickly you run out of, you hit technical limitations around the governance, supporting the size, scale, complexity of this. Also, they wanted the ability for workers to be able to use mobile devices. And often when you're out in the field, when you're walking through train tunnels and things, and you're trying to use your phone, often you're not going to have reception. You're going to be working offline. So they wanted the ability for construction workers to be able to keep taking photos and recording all the artifacts on a construction site. So with Nintex, what they were able to do was to use the mobile app to work, to install that onto their phone, use the native features of the phone around the locations, the camera, working offline, being able to record all the artifacts, and then when they're back online again, that data would automatically sync into the SharePoint portal where it's all been managed, maintained. And it also meant that they did not have to go through the process of having to upload files and content one at a time. So that helps to really streamline and cut back the costs and time involved with trying to do this activity. One other example, so this was a learning management app which built with the audit office to help them with their training. One of the things was that they wanted the ability to register for events, to manage how many users were involved. There was an approval process. So without doing heavily customization in SharePoint, because with government, they much prefer the configuration-based way of building customized apps, we use Nintex as a platform to sit on top of SharePoint. SharePoint being their portal, dashboard, the place to capture that information, and then using the Nintex on top around improving the user experience into usability for users to do registrations and approvals and presenting that in a format as well that could be developed in a very quick time, and also reducing the code technical debt as well once that goes live. So then it becomes easy for the audit office to make changes to processes and changes to forms without using any code. So it's all kind of a low code approach. Sort of partners. So the company we work with, OutSystems, we work with AdLib, Microsoft partner, and Nintex partner. And just for some of our reference, these are just some of the client sites which we currently work with and provide our services and solutions into. So across the local government, New South Wales government, Queensland, federal, and commercial clients.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you.
So, quick example of why Seers clients choose to work with Seers. I think Steve has outlined that in his slides, but this is the real reason. Speed's good, delivery is fantastic, great track record. We believe in innovation, delivering that to our customers, and we have a great team of people with a great culture that delivers great outcomes to our customers. So I'll just hand control to Chris. Now, Chris Ellis is a technical evangelist at Nintex, and Chris is going to take us through the Nintex platform and a brief demonstration of that to give you an idea of how we've been able to build these solutions on top of Nintex. And then we'll move on to a quick view of how we re-platform something. So Chris, over to you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ian. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Yeah, as Ian says, my job for the next 10 to 15 minutes is to immerse you in as much Nintex technology as I possibly can. I will do things from both an end user point of view, and then we'll look at some of the tools to see how quick and easy it is to make amendments based on requirements that possibly come from customers. I'm going to keep the architecture pretty light, so I'll just go over what Nintex is, what it gives us from a toolbox point of view, and kind of who we are as well. So Nintex, we started life very much as a workflow tool. Still 12 years later, our core offering is Nintex Workflow. Drag, drop, no code to actually build those process automation deployments. But what we've done over the years is we've bolted on functionality when the market has really needed it. So bringing a forms product that is quick and easy to build, rich, feature-rich, but also look, feel, and design-rich forms to the end user. So that includes some sort of value adds like rules, like set field value, like hide show, some of the more common aspects of forms rolled into a simple, easy to use package. Forms very quickly became intuitive to bring in a mobile platform. Everybody wanted work in their pocket, and that's where the Nintex mobile framework comes in. The ability to surface these forms and or workflows into an Android, iOS capable application that is available offline, and that was something that Stephen alluded to in one of the examples he talked about, and it's fully branded, it supports customer branding and so on. Nintex Extensions is our appreciation that data doesn't necessarily live within SharePoint, within Office 365. We all have a CRM platform. A lot of people are now using things like MS Teams, different ERP systems, SAP, so on and so forth. Further reaching to things like IoT, machine learning capabilities that are published by Microsoft's Cognitive Services, and so on. And our extensions layer allows you to plug in all of those APIs that are accessible, essentially bringing all of that capability to a centralized workflow. Nintex Document Generation is our native document generation capability, content creation as part of workflow. Now, many of us will have hundreds of templates that live in an organization where maybe 90 to 95% of the information that's required by an end document or end piece of content is pretty static. And really all we're doing is changing that 5 to 10% per instance that gets created. Now, why should our end users be required to download those templates, make those amendments, and then carry on the journey? When in fact, they're probably raising that information from a form, they're maybe pulling it in from a CRM, and that's something that Workflow can gather and merge with my secure stored template that's up in my intranet or in my electronic file, OneDrive, Box, Dropbox, and so on. And finally, you will have done a lot of great work with Workflow, with forms, mobilizing these applications, pulling data in, getting things approved, time stamping, performing calculations. Makes a lot of sense to report on exactly what you've done. And that's where our Nintex Hawkeye tool comes in. The ability to surface and visualize workflow data in an analytics platform that is native to the business intelligence applications that you use. So what we allow is the positioning of beacons inside of a workflow to promote data when it's most obvious and most intuitive, and also to gate processes into smaller sub-stages for reporting. And I'll show you some examples of all of the above in a demonstration that I do in just a minute. Nintex for the best part of a decade have been known as the SharePoint workflow guys, and that's changed in the last couple of years with brand new on-ramps to Nintex, to process automation, through Office 365, where we are now a primary workflow tool executing our 70 millionth workflow in that ecosystem just last month. And now the new Nintex Workflow Cloud, which is an agnostic workflow engine. It's an engine that sits devoid of a SharePoint underpinning that allows you to plug into all of your content sources via that Nintex extensions layer. We also have Nintex for Box, Nintex for Service Max, and Nintex for Salesforce, which uses that Workflow Cloud technology inside those systems of record. Just progress to the last slide that I'll show before we go into a little bit of show and tell. So if you start to think about all the processes that may need automated within a business, they can certainly extend to dozens, hundreds. Some companies that are Nintex customers are in the thousands of workflow processes built. And this is a real snapshot of what can be automated with what we're about to see with the Nintex platform. Certainly not restricted to that, and Nintex doesn't position itself as an off-the-shelf in a specific vertical and or horizontal. We like to think of ourselves as everyday process builders for really anyone and any business unit that wants to use us. Outside of this, we've got a lot of great mobile use cases with incident report, image capture, and annotation, and what we see on the screen today as well. So I'm just going to take you through a quick tour of an example. I'm going to show my screen here, so hopefully I can. How do we do this? Let's show meeting controls and share screen. So stop screen sharing. Do you want to continue? Here we go. Okay. So if somebody could let me know once you can see my screen. And there should just be a lovely picture of a beach, but now an intranet as well.
We can see your screen.
Excellent. All right. So Crisco is a typical company. They've got an intranet which sits on Office 365 using SharePoint Online. They also have a CRM system. They use Salesforce, and they have a purchase order request, which they have made digital. Now, some of the issues that they were having were auditability, governance, compliance with who had approved what, but also a lot of things were slipping through the gaps when it came to adding this information to Salesforce around accounts, customers, contacts, and so on. They also spent a lot of time building individual pieces of collateral for every order that was raised, and they had no centralization of the products and those PDPs associated to those products. So let's go through a quick example end to end of that raised orders into completed orders process. Well, let's start with my raised orders list, and I'll essentially just kick off a new process via a form. So we've got a SharePoint list here with some metadata, and we're going to create a new item.
Chris, we can see your Nintex Hawkeye screen.
Okay, that's the incorrect screen, but what I'll do is I will drag across.
Thank you.
All right. So what we have here is an Nintex form for SharePoint Online. Some of the things worth pointing out, it's intuitively picked up who I am as the end user, and it's using some user profile information to bring back things that we know about Chris from Active Directory. But let's fill in some vendor details. So if you've been on Google today, you'll know that according to Google Doodle, it's Omar Sharif's birthday today. So I'll use Omar Sharif as my example, just so that once we get to some of the generation parts of it, you'll know this is no smoke and mirrors here. We're building live. So I've done my rain dance to the demo gods today as well. I'm going to use a nintexdemo@outlook.com. That's an external email address. So we're now going to reach beyond to the customer. Omar can be my CEO. Let's just pick something at random. And you'll see once I select Melbourne here from my city that's available, we're going to automatically update the postcode. That's a set field value rule that we've built into the form. And finally, we'll put in a number and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now we come back and visit this little phone as well. Let's select some products. These are coming from a centralized product list, which is also bringing back the cost. So these are my different levels of insurance that this customer has requested. You see at the bottom, we've now auto-calculated that grand total, but we're going to give them some discount because of a multi-policy that we have. We'll give them 5% discount. That form is working out what the discount value is, and it's also going to apply that to the grand total. Let's select 2-year contract, and we'll submit. So if you see, there's a little rule that I've built in here, which is using an expression for the actual phone number to be in a correct format. Now that could include things like ABNs, postcodes, any date ranges that you want to apply. So let's just correct that as per the red text and submit. So that form submission will actually kick off a workflow in the back end. And it's going to do some smart stuff at the front end. So if we refresh this screen, the first few things that workflow has actually done is it's auto-created my purchase order a title. But if we scroll to the end of this list, it's also it will also auto-generate the contract end date based on the duration and the start date. So I'm not having to worry about that as a customer, as a sales guy. It's just going to automatically populate that once it hits that certain action in the workflow. Now, the next thing that it's going to do for me is it's going to update and add an account into Salesforce. So if I refresh my Salesforce screen, and this can apply to dynamic CRM as well. So if you're a CRM customer and that is your CRM of choice, the same applies. Now we've got Dr. Shivago in here as my account name. That's my vendor. We've got them in as a prospect. So my workflow has automatically set them in as a prospect until they sign and return that contract to me. So if we open up this account, what we're also doing is we're adding contact, which is Omar Sharif, from that form as well. So it's done that kind of hybrid business solution for me without me having to jump into another application to actually take care of that part of work. And now if I'm the designer here and I want to make some amendments to my form, it's as easy as selecting Nintex Forms from the ribbon. And that's going to bring me into my Forms Designer, and it's going to allow me to add some new controls if it's required. Now, perhaps the business, Chris Coe, has come back to me and saying that they want to be able to select who the next approver is for this process. That's as easy as finding a person control and dragging that into my form. So what we've got in our left-hand toolbox here, which we'll call it, are some controls. We'll find the position on the page. We want to add our approver just after the contract details. Let's just drag that control in, and it's as easy as click to configure. Now that design experience itself is fully responsive. And if I want to view this on a mobile device, that form too is also responsive. So I'll have a look at my Android here. We'll open up Chrome, and I've opened that form up. So if I'm hitting that form URL, I have the same experience, the same rules, the same autofill, hide, show, repeating sections, so on and so forth, but in a mobile view of that form. Now the next stage for Crisco was to take that form to the mobile application. They built a mobile app using Nintex App Studio, and they've deployed that mobile app to their end users. What the mobile app gives them is an offline capability. And if we search for my raised orders form, it's there. It's going to give me the same behavior as the desktop and also that mobile responsive. So moving on, back to my back to my end user, sorry. As the workflow progresses, that person is going to actually receive a task. And you'll see my contract end date has actually been updated now. Let's open up my tasks. In Office 365 Outlook, I have a task. Now we're going to use Microsoft's actionable messages here to review all the information about the task. And this is going to be unique for every instance that has been raised. And we're simply going to say, that's good with me. I'm going to approve that task. And approving that task is going to move that task through the next stage of the workflow. So now if I jump back as the designer and look at my actual workflow, again, everything is drag drop for me. And we're focusing here on my task stage. So my task stage, we might want to add, again, some more feedback from the business, which has requested that a second level of approval has been added. So we might need a legal review after the sales review has been undertaken. So what we can do is use some Nintex technology called a state machine, and we can add in an easy, fluid business process. So we can add in my state machine, which is a drag drop action. That action should now just populate. We're going to drag in my sales review stage, which is stage 1. I think my screen share might have stalled. And then I can add a second task into that stage 2 for legal review. And we can simply stay within this little loop here until both parties are actually happy with the outcomes. If I add a new assign a task into state 2, and then I would, given time, I would tweak these set next states just to make sure that we are actually jumping through the states as required, and then we actually exit once both sales and legal have reviewed that process. I won't burn up too much time there. It's just a case of copying these states and configuring them. But what I will do is quickly move on to the customer signature section. So that document has been, my contract has actually been generated, and I'm now in my external Outlook. I've been sent an email by one of our e-signatory partners, Adobe in this instance, to actually sign and review that document. And as we open up that document, this is a very unique document for that individual. So we got our front cover here, which is a PowerPoint template. We have, just for smoke and mirror's sake, we've time-stamped exactly when that document was created for that customer. We've got a unique table of contents there. Unfortunately, my test document has, this is right front and center of that, but it's got my product information there. As we scroll down, you'll see it's got my unique PDPs for those individual products that we selected. And I've highlighted in yellow as that document generation action processes where it's picking up the customer name. So we just quickly sign, Click on that signature. And apply. Click to sign. And Adobe will then take that as a completed. That's then going to pass that document back to my Office 365 environment. And what we're also doing in the background for in my Salesforce ecosystem is we're changing that process. So once the customer has actually signed and returned that document, we're actually then telling Salesforce, if we drag in my CRM environment here, my Salesforce, it's now updating that customer type to be a direct customer. So that's only going to happen after they have approved that document. And finally, just to close the loop here, we've returned a status of complete to the originator of that sales process. And we've also got the URL to the returned document. And if we click on that, and scroll down to page number 2, it's been signed by that customer and returned to me. And in the space of 10 minutes, we've been able to eliminate what could well be days worth of lag in a sales process simply by introducing the Nintex product suite into a business like Crisco. And with that, I'll hand back to the powers that be to carry on the presentation.
Thank you, Chris. Let me just get the share my screen back and we'll be good to go. Right, can everyone see that screen again? Yep, can we see the screen?
Yep.
We can, fantastic. Right, thanks everyone. Let me move on. Now, the next piece we're going to look at, and I will hand control to my colleague, is how we re-platformed application in a couple of days for a customer. Arfine will take us through that. Steve touched on this earlier, but this will give this to you all in a little bit more detail, and there's a video that Arfine will talk over to show how he did it. So Arfine, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ian. The re-platforming app that you've talked about is an app that we did for a Australian federal government agency called ESSEC. They have a couple of built-in existing Lotus Notes apps that they ask us to redevelop. The main challenges that we were facing were low code and no customization. The design of the app was that it's a many-to-many relationship that was of course not available out of the box in SharePoint, because that is what they were asking. We needed to migrate their Lotus Notes app to SharePoint. The forms, of course, using SharePoint with business logic was not possible, considering the fact that they were looking for no customization / no code. One of course, their requirement was that we do not have crazy deployment scripts and downtime and configuration and third-party installations and WSPs and all this SharePoint crazy stuff. The solution that we proposed was a combination of Nintex forms and workflows with SharePoint out-of-the-box features. Of course, we have talked about Nintex forms and workflows. The features that we use out of the box were SharePoint list with standard SharePoint list views. So I'm going to play a little video here. Let's create this form is built text form, and it's very easy to use. Microsoft Office, vendor is Microsoft, version is 2018, supplier is Microsoft again. Serial number is 2018. random number, location is Sydney, excuse me. Number of licenses we bought are 50, and the date of purchase is the 1st of January, 2018. Let's create another software. It's the same software. But at a different location. Number of licenses we bought in Melbourne are 100, and then the date of purchase is the same, 1st of January 2018. Now you can see that we have two softwares, Microsoft Office. One is based in Sydney and one is based in Melbourne. There are a couple of views that we created. One of them is software by location. And then when you click on software by location, we see that we have one in Melbourne and one in Sydney. Now let's create users. We are going to create two users here. One is a staff and one is non-staff. The difference between a staff and non-staff is that it's very easy to talk to AD from Nintex Forms, and this is where we call our staff users. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find myself, it's a people picker in SharePoint. I select my name and then I click validate. Now what happens is that Forms goes and reads the AD data and brings in my staff name and my location. My computer name is something, my business unit is business development, for example, and I click save. Now I'm going to create one more staff. And this time it's a non-AD user. I'm going to create Ian here. Location is Melbourne. Computer name is sales and marketing. And I create user here. Now we have two users and two softwares created. As we have two users and two softwares already created, let's start adding softwares to users first. So I go back to my software registry and I pick Microsoft Office from Sydney. And I click here to add users to it. And then I select my software and I can pick the Arfine, which is also in Sydney, and I click save. Now I have Arfine using Microsoft Office in Sydney location. Now we are going to add a software to a user. What we did initially is we added a user to a software. Now let's go and pick in and add a software to this user. Click software, and then I select my Ian user, and I pick Microsoft Office, which is in Melbourne, and I click save. Now you can see here that we have Microsoft Office being used, and we have two users using Microsoft Office at a different location. We can go and look at other views that we have created. For example, software by people. Now we have two separate users. If one of the users had many softwares, it's going to group and show them here. And if you go back and notice, if I go back to my software registry and I notice here that Sydney has one user, so the license count is +1. And Microsoft Office in Melbourne has 100 licenses, but Ian is using one of them already. So now the available licenses is 99. As you've already talked about Nintex Forms, let's look at what workflows we have used. One of the workflows that we've already talked about is the number of licenses that it's maintaining. That whenever a user is added to a software or vice versa, we go and look at the number of licenses and we add a license to the software. One of the other workflows is that how can we take the software or a license user away from an existing data? So what happens here is that I go to my software by location and I pick one of the softwares and user relation. In this case, with Microsoft Office. We have 100 licenses and one of them is already being used by Ian. So I'm going to click on this. And when it brings up this one, I'm going to edit the record and I'm going to remove the relation. Keep in mind, I'm not removing software or not using Ian. I'm removing the relation between them. So if I click on delete, it's going to ask for a confirmation. I click OK, it goes and removes the relationship between them. I get a confirmation message. I click OK. And if I go back to my software registry, I see that now I have 100 licenses back because Ian is not using that software anymore. And if I go back to my user registry, and if I look at Ian, I don't see any software being shown in the list for this user. As we have talked about, we have a couple of views. First, this being software registry, user registry, staff by software. Now we only have one staff using the software, and we can see here that there are two workflows that are running on this one. Of course, for the demo purpose, we have these views shown here with these columns. We're going to remove them, of course, when we deploy. We have software by location. We have people by location. And we have archived software as well, because sometimes what happens is that this software gets archived, not being used anymore, which of course also means from a business standpoint that if a software is archived, we keep the licenses or we return the licenses, and users cannot add more, administrators cannot add more licenses to that software. Can I see your screen again? Yeah, okay. So now we have a little demo. Let's continue to the next one. The design, we have already seen the demo. The design issues that we had with SharePoint is that users and softwares have a many-to-many relation. And as I've already talked to you guys, that it's how difficult it is to maintain that in SharePoint using out-of-the-box features. Of course, there's no many-to-many relation in SharePoint. So of course, Nintex was there for us to help and rescue. And we used Nintex forms and workflows running behind the scenes. We broke down the relation from many-to-many to one-to-many and many-to-one. And software staff details being the list, SharePoint list, where we store the relations. And this is how we build this or replan from this application, this Lotus Note existing application in SharePoint using the Nintex forms and workflows in 2 days.
It's fantastic. Thank you. And I think that we'll all agree that 2 days is a very short period of time to get such an extensive outcome. And that's what we aim to do. So that leads us on nicely to look at the what we call our 1515 program. Now, the 1515 program is a Nintex software bundle with Seers services. So we do this with a 12-month subscription to the 5 Workflow Enterprise Edition delivered by Nintex, which gives us, as you can imagine, 5 workflows, 25 forms. You have this on-premise on your Office 365 or your Nintex Workflow Cloud platforms. Includes Nintex Mobile, as Chris mentioned earlier. We're finding that the vast majority of our customers have a mobile strategy, and Nintex Mobile is proving a very efficient way of delivering these very quickly. The App Studio, so you can build as many of those as you want. So there's no limit on those. No limit on the number of mobile applications you can build, which I'm sure using those processes is great value. Also, Nintex Hawkeye. Nintex Hawkeye is a BI platform that comes with Nintex, so you can start to really drill down into those areas in your processes, in your applications that are not performing as well as you'd like, and start to make some real change to those. BI, as Steve mentioned in his presentation, is an area that we are doing extensive work, and more the actual information, the business information around an application is as important as the data held within it. Data is really important. Value is in your data. Plus the document generation, we only touched on that briefly. We saw the document being generated for approval. What we're proposing includes 2,500 document generations, which is a pretty substantial number of documents there. So the Seers piece is will provide 5 workflows, forms, mobile applications, and mobile insight is the other part of the 15. So it's $15,000 for the workflow, $15,000 for the services, and those are based on a simple to medium complexity. We'd sit down with you, understand which of your candidates you'd like us to look at, and then transform those for you into an automated process with forms and BI insight. That says $30,000 Australian dollars ex GST in total, which, you know, within a very short period of time will provide you with a substantial number of outcomes, which you'll see some real business value from. This is an offer that's currently open till the 30th of June, and we look forward to speaking to you around this offer and around the platform. So it's quite a straightforward proposition insofar as we believe we can deliver great outcomes to you in a short period of time using Nintex and the great expertise of the Seers team. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to open the floor for any questions that you may have. So the lines are now open for any. If we don't have any questions, I'll say thank you very much for joining us today. I hope that was of interest to you. I have recorded the presentations. Those recordings will be made available to you to share with people you may feel are interested. And otherwise, you can contact us at inquiry@seers.digital, and then we can address any of your questions you may have. And I will send out the recording in an email shortly after it's been collated. Once again, may I say thank you to Steve, Chris, and Arfine for presenting today. Thank you for everyone attending, and we look forward to speaking to you very soon. With that, I'll wrap up the presentation and this session. Thank you very much, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Goodbye.